Crimson Desert is an upcoming open-world action-adventure game developed by Pearl Abyss, the creators of Black Desert Online, set in the war-torn land of Pywel. The game follows the stories of mercenaries struggling to survive amidst mythical beasts, hostile rulers, and other threats. Crimson Desert is Witcher 3, Kingdom Come, Dragon's Dogma, Final Fantasy, and Zelda, all in one hard-to-believe package. But is Crimson Desert the next great open-world game? Crimson Desert was first shown in 2023 at Gamescom with an overly impressive trailer, and fans didn't believe it was real. So Pearl Abyss, the studio behind the game, just released a 52-minute gameplay trailer with nearly uncut continuous footage. We are going to look at the best highlights, about 15 minutes of this incredible gameplay. The open world looks beautiful, and it visualizes Capcom and CD Projekt Red's best work, with wide open vistas. Crimson Desert has a vast but divided content, and the game evokes a mix of some of our favorite open world fantasy RPGs. Expect a mix of gritty realism and fantasy elements. The game features intense combat, horseback archery, and some Grand Theft Auto-like mechanics, such as hijacking horse-drawn wagons. I suspect Cliff, the character you play as, will be much like Talion from Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, born again with new powers, the Black Crow. First, we'll look at the world, tone, and scope of Crimson Desert that tells the story of Pywel, a vast continent of divided regions inhabited by people struggling to survive in its ever-changing lands. From the vast plains of Akapen to the inhospitable cold lands of Kuwaitan or the barren desert, each region possesses its own unique beauty. However, you might have to scrape away the grime just to see it. These are the words from Pearl Abyss themselves describing the game, and you will play as Cliff, a Greymane fighting to protect their homeland from war. And let's take a look at the castle kingdom of Harnand, the Minas Tirith-like city full of friends and foes. This looks incredibly detailed. And as you travel the cities in Pywel, you'll also encounter filthy alleys, destitute homesteads, and all myriad of different characters that are from different races and locations in the world. And each location has its own unique character that is both fantastical and grounded in gritty realism. The new generation of weapons has emerged alongside the swords. You have pistols, cannons, and axes, and even hand-mounted cannons. And the advent of this mysterious art of magic and alchemy that you see in the game has gifted some of the people to imbue some of these deadly weapons, which your character, Cliff, has some of his very own. But let's take a look at the best part, the combat.
Die, Greymane!
You'll often see callbacks to something that looks like a Witcher game, Dragon's Dogma. When you get into combat, it starts to look like Final Fantasy. Also has some elements that come from the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor series. The world seems to be fully fleshed out with a ton of NPCs, villagers, and other people that are walking around doing their own tasks. It really sells the idea of a lived-in world that you can interact with. Some of the first flourishes that we see are quick cutscenes where you are watching some of the action play out, but immediately follows is real under-the-control combat, which is very much like Dragon's Dogma and Final Fantasy mixed. Also watching the way that the melee attacks happen, jumping slashes, heavy kicks with massive camera shakes, and then you have a mythical power that is drawn up from a center icon that is in the shape of a diamond that fills up in a swirling pattern that will give you a chance to level up and use your magic heavy attacks and then unleash a barrage of white hot sparks on your enemy. There is a ton of gore in this game. There is splashes of blood spill and brutal takedowns that are really selling this idea of a violent world that is really interactive. You can also grab enemies and throw them roll over them, push them, kick them, and do bashes and heavy attacks. All of this is interactive with a world that breaks around you. Barrels and fires that you can actually throw enemies into and light them on fire, something we saw in Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. The game shows a big battle here at night with fire that showcases what would probably be early on in the game as your character meets a crazy demise with the enemies that you're fighting called the Black Bears, and they have that name because they're wearing bear hoods. But these enemies are ruining this world, they're causing war, and there are many different factions that it looks like that you can either side with or fight against in the campaign. You're able to use choice by using human shields or straight up take on the entire horde of enemies.
Get him! Kill him!
And there are tons of different animations if you watch the swinging sword spins and throwing the enemies, shoulder bashing them, and using your shield to parry attacks. Dodge rolling is also a part of the combat. You can jump, dodge roll, block, evade attacks, and use that opportunity to let that power meter build up so you can use big attacks to take out more than one enemy at a time. It seems like in Crimson Desert, they want you to feel totally outnumbered, as many of the combat sequences we see in this video have you fighting against 6 or 7, sometimes 20 different enemies. And all of these are not just waiting to take their turn to attack you. And you can use the environment to your advantage, and using the fire surrounding you, or using sharp objects or big wagons to push enemies into, you'll even have to fight in and around crowds. One thing this video didn't show us was the ranged attacks. The game boasts that you'll have gun-type weapons or flintlock weapons and also bow and arrow, but we never see it in this gameplay reveal. But it looks like the combat that they're showing is going to take a lot of timing, a test of your endurance, as you'll continue to fight enemies for long battle sequences. But it looks like in Crimson Desert you can also slow things down. Here is a stealth segment where you can crouch down and take out enemies, just like we see in Shadow of Mordor. So it looks like combat will have many different strategies you can use, and it looks like we've only scratched the surface. The lighting model is really impressive in Crimson Desert. When you go into interiors, you can see a really great volumetric lighting. You can see the way that light warms and fills up interior locations with reflections that are probably screen space reflections. And also, I think what we're seeing here in this gameplay showcase is probably running on a really capable PC. Looking at the way that lighting and shadows casts across green meadows and landscapes and off rocky hillsides really sells the idea of a world that you want to live in and be immersed in. Just like some of our favorite RPG fantasy games, in Crimson Desert you can ride on horseback through the countryside or even up to big fortresses and castles. This is where the art style totally reminds me of the recent Dragon's Dogma 2 game, and being able to emulate something like what Capcom can do in the open world with stunning graphics really sells the game here. Character models and NPCs and other people that you will interact with in Crimson Desert look very good, and there are humans, there are elves, there are large giant trolls, and then there are magical creatures which you will encounter, which really elevates the game into more than just a fantasy RPG. Now there is the magical part of Crimson Desert, and most of it is really truly a mystery, as the 52-minute gameplay segment really didn't explain much other than a few short cutscenes. But your character is able to travel into other dimensions, and one of the most prolific things that they showed in the game that really surprised everybody was the ability to jump and fly across a huge open world, which brought everyone to that vibe from Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. And it looks like Crimson Desert is emulating so many of our favorite games, from Zelda, Witcher, Dragon's Dogma, Final Fantasy, so much more. And not only are you able to fly and fall great distances to get where you need to go, but you're given the Black Crow power, which allows you to fly and float across the landscape. We don't know if this power will also come into play to use in different combat situations or if it's just for traversal, but this is a great thing that we're seeing in a recent game that came out last year, Enshrouded. And looking over a huge open world map like this while you're flying around really shows that they have a huge polished open world. At least we could hope that this game is super polished and not buggy. Pearl Abyss is really being super ambitious with Crimson Desert. Look at how much draw distance there is. A huge world. I hope from the little bit that we've seen that there aren't spacious open areas out in the wilderness, and I hope it'll be littered with encampments or other entrenchments of enemies that you can happen upon, or friendlies or foes that you can decide whether you're going to attack, steal, or whatever. This is the true form of an open world game. It's very surprising to see Pearl Abyss come up with something so ambitious in a time when most games are just coming out with more sequels. And this gameplay trailer doesn't even showcase side missions or optional content that you can interact with, but it does look like a very formulaic open world, and that could be a really good thing. Another really cool gameplay segment of this trailer shows off what I would call the duels. This is your opportunity to face off against enemies or decide to take them on into battle.
Good. Do your worst, Pywel.
Of course, during medieval times, it is of legend that people would never stand down from a challenge. And you get to take on a couple of different enemies that challenge you. One in this courtyard, this Dark Souls knight that takes you on and he is super aggressive with large kicks and large red spark-covered flashes of his sword. And this really takes on the opportunity to be creative with how you use combat, using spins, parries, dodge rolls, and waiting for your power meter to fill up. So you can unleash damage on the enemy. And this all takes place with really cool real-time combat. The world looks absolutely gorgeous. It's a fantastic looking play on some of our favorite open world games. And there is a lot to be excited about with Crimson Desert. There is also a lot to be very wary about. Will this game be what it sells out to be, with an hour-long segment of footage showing you this is really how the world plays out? But will the rest of it offer that opportunity for us to live in this world and to level up a character and build up your very own version of Cliff as a warrior?
You challenge me. Who are you to step into my domain and oppose me? You and the sly rat who put that word in your mouth will pay.
Crimson Desert is coming out sometime in mid-2025, and so far from what we've seen, it looks like they are planning to deliver exactly on that promise. This is Colteastwood. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Once we all saw Crimson Desert, we all took notice, and I missed this game last year at Gamescom, but everybody was so unsure. Would this really be as good a game as it looks to be? And they showed, hey, we'll show you a whole hour of the game, and I think that's pretty promising. I think lately we've seen so many sequels and so many games that are hashing out things, and I know some games don't always resonate with everybody. There are some games that I like that people are like, why do you even like that? But we're all very different. But I think right now, the resounding answer is most people are really excited about Crimson Desert, and they think it has a lot of potential. I'm excited to see what turns out with this game, and I think it'll look great on console and PC. I can't wait. I hope they have a release date ready for early next year, because 2025 is going to be absolutely packed with fantasy RPGs and games even bigger than that. If you ended up enjoying this video, let me know by liking and subscribing to the channel. If you want to further support what we do here on the Colteastwood channel, you can do that by hitting the join button below, and either of those to get you early access for videos, monthly merch giveaways, and so much more. Check out the Patreon, or any of those links in the description will get you access to that to check it out. Also, check out the X&C podcast. There, Middle-Aged Game Guy and I, Mag, will be talking about all of the new upcoming games, some of the things we're hearing behind the scenes, and so much more. XC Podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other places where you check out your podcast platforms. It's live every Monday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's Pacific to Eastern. And then we'll be there live for you to check that out, or you can always do on demand on those podcast platforms. So let me know what you think about Crimson Desert. I know it's a long 52-minute video and it might be too much to look through, and I hope that this 15-minute cut really gave you the best, and it really is the best things that I saw that I wanted to showcase today in this video. Let me know what you think of Crimson Desert in the comment section, and while you're there, as I always say, please be nice.